Okay, it says we're recording, so please take it away.
Oh, great. Well, hey, everyone. For those of you I don't know, or you don't know me, I'm Jeff. I lead the teams focused on collaboration in Microsoft 365, including Teams and SharePoint. And of course, I love and am grateful for all the community work. For fun, we just, in our inner rings and teams this week, rolled out the first step of our avatar support, which will be a fun way to engage in meetings. Turns out your avatar always looks like they're paying attention, while the real you could be eating your lunch, for example. And it's a intermediate step, if you will. We need to go through this step to get to the sort of full 3D immersive scenes, which we also have running. I'm not going to show you in real code, but I thought it would be fun before I turn the camera off to show you, the first step to the metaverse in Teams. Okay, enough of that. You should be able to see me now, right?
Yes, we can see now.
Okay. All right, let me load up the slide deck. I made a pretty simple slide presentation that I thought would just give you an overview of where we are with SharePoint, its role in the system. Lots of you obviously are experts, but I thought it'd be good to just give a quick perspective on it and then open it up for questions. I'm very grateful that you all get together and support each other, and just wanted to make sure from time to time I get a chance to go to community events and learn what's going on. So first, I'd start off with, I hope you all feel lucky. I do, that this is an incredible community of people that over the years has supported each other, as the technology portfolio at Microsoft has grown dramatically, help people grow your careers in network. And it's just, we saw during COVID that community was more needed than ever because of the difficulties of having in-person connections and the pace of change and technology and how companies work in the last 2 years. So we don't take that for granted. And certainly you're all a huge part of it. Thank you. I hopefully don't need to tell you what you get out of it, but the things people tell me is sharing real world best practices, not just, the feature set that we talk about, but what's going on. Obviously, as we're introducing stuff new every month, and something, we give you sort of transparency on what's coming. Sometimes we make the dates, sometimes we're a little late. So these are good forums where you get updates on the roadmap. Career networking, I know one thing that people have told me in user groups and SharePoint Saturdays was sort of indispensable for them, was a chance to meet with other people and seek out new opportunities. But not just professional, personal as well. At the M365 conference last week, it was so great to see so many people in person that hadn't seen each other in years, and see how genuinely happy they were. And the thing that connected them was SharePoint or Office 365, Power Apps, Teams, etc. But they were there because they wanted to see the people, not just see the technology. And of course, these forums are a great place to, sometimes we get to attend and get the feedback directly. Sometimes the organizers or the user groups, hear it all from you and pass it along to us. And so we really, really appreciate that. Hopefully I don't have to spend much time on it, but just sort of sometimes people like to hear my framing on SharePoint, where it's been and where it's going. And so I am glad to do that really quickly. Our first phase, our first 5 years, if you will, was just the novel idea that productivity wasn't a standalone activity, that it wasn't just about authoring tools, that you need a collaboration server to tie them together. I remember when we started SharePoint, there were people said that the Office team didn't build servers. And sure enough, we did. And, as I think some people know the history of, we had 2 SharePoints at the beginning. We refactored them on the new .NET in version 2. We added content management in version 3. And by that sort of 2007 period, the product really took off. And that's when we kept getting stunned by the community events around the world, our big events, SharePoint conferences, and just, we're really blessed by the energy and feedback and community that developed around it. Then we went into a period that was exciting, but frankly tough, perhaps the most challenging in the 20 plus year in history in SharePoint, is where we were doing the cloud transformation. We were clearly ahead of both our customer base and frankly where the technology was. We started hosting SharePoint back 2007, 2008 for customers. But it was June 2011 where we launched Office 365. And the bulk of our customers, including in forums like this, said, we're not going to the cloud ever. And we said, but you can focus on the real value of the product and the things you hate about SharePoint, which is upgrades. We will worry about that for you. You won't have to do these upgrades again, and we'll patch the servers and we'll get new modern servers all the time, and they'll be fast, and we can release new value to you. But it was tough, and so we had to sort of get lots of feedback about the controls people wanted. Frankly, the market for the cloud needed to develop. We needed to advance the state of the service, and then by about 2016 or so, things started to take off in the cloud, and we renewed SharePoint, if you will, both a new user experience we called modern, and I know there's pros and cons of what we did at that point. Aligned our development platform around the Graph API, SharePoint Framework, and Power Platform, which was brand new, and we announced at that point. And then made OneDrive the sort of simple way to get all your files, both personal and group. And I think we've largely been continuous on that strategy. We foreshadowed integration with groups that became teams. It wasn't ready to be announced in 2016. We've built Viva on top of Teams and SharePoint and more. And so this newest phase, if you will, is when SharePoint continues as a end user experience and as a platform, but also powers a broader set of things. And so I'll talk about that. But that's sort of my take on the 5 areas of SharePoint. The thing we really want to reinforce is we built this together. It's, by definition, it's a collaboration tool. So it does nothing unless people use it to work together. And we really don't know what to build unless you all give us feedback. Now, sometimes we're willing, like a good tech company needs to be ahead of customers and evangelize the cloud. Or, we're out there talking about Viva, and a lot of people are like, what is Viva? I don't get it yet. But I hope you feel like we're building this together with feedback, and that includes not just SharePoint, but Teams and Microsoft 365 all up. And I think it's good to sort of calibrate how we're doing on that, because you've all have invested your time, your energy, your careers, your reputation on SharePoint and Teams, and we're very grateful for it. And we want you to feel part of something that's super, super successful. So just to share the stats, we really feel like we have a lot of strong competitors in the market. Folks know these. Amazon, Google, Slack, Zoom, tons of new startups. This is a very dynamic industry where people have a lot of choices. But we have a unique solution for collaboration that brings together the most flexible communication tool in Teams and the most flexible content management system in SharePoint, all in one. And with lots of user integration, common development platform, common security model. And, there's seams between the, I don't want to sort of portray it's, there's no work left to be done to simplify it. But in terms of cobbling together other things in the marketplace, we really think we have a unique solution. And then when the pandemic hit and companies no longer had a choice about whether they were going to do hybrid, distributed, anywhere collaboration in the cloud, and had to move, the ones that hadn't moved, we're really grateful to be the sort of clear leader there, with 250 million users in the cloud that are active. SharePoint, people are adding 100 petabytes of new content every month to SharePoint, including so exabytes already in it. I shared last week that there's 8 million new SharePoint sites that are active, that are being created every month. Obviously there's many tens of millions more that are created before that. All up 10x growth in the last 5 years, whether you measure users or storage or API calls. And then if you look at the analyst reports on content management, we're the clear leader, even with some really strong competitors out there. So hopefully you feel very much part of the success of this. We don't take it for granted. We know, again, there's a lot more sophisticated customers out there than there were 10, 15, 20 years ago. More demanding requirements on us for collaboration, which is great. There's lots of great companies in this space, but we, as Satya would say, we're going to succeed or fail by how customer driven we are. And so we're really focused on being the most customer driven company out there. So first, as far as looking forward, and those slides were a nice look back. I like to spend all my time looking forward. The first question I get the most is SharePoint an app or a platform? Some people saying jokingly, some people aren't so joking when they ask of me. And so I thought about by the way, this is a brand new slide deck. I'd never created this in this form before, but I did it for this user group because I thought it would be fun to sort of tell a new story. And so I thought about pulling together a super detailed architectural diagram on SharePoint, but I decided, let me just make something simple and clear, and I'll talk through it. And so SharePoint's both an app and a platform. We have out-of-box user experiences, no developer required, minimal IT required, for files. Obviously OneDrive being the hero file app that's built on SharePoint. For media, Teams meeting recordings and stream will be based on SharePoint. Microsoft lists are an integral part of SharePoint from the beginning. We've broken them out as well, so you can use lists as an app. Of course, we love SharePoint websites for navigation and publishing, custom apps, and so forth. And then I thought it was worth calling out one of the new modules we've got in Viva Topics, where it's this first-class concept of topic cards and topic pages that let you organize information in SharePoint and other systems, Stream and Yammer and so forth. And so, we have a set of experiences where we want to have a great out-of-box experience. Of course, they can come together in a SharePoint site, but you can use each of them independently. And then in the platform, I would say about 2/3 the SharePoint team works on the infrastructure and 1/3 on the applications. So, 1,000+ people just on the plumbing of SharePoint, if you will, and looks nothing like the on-premises product that you deployed a few years ago, some of you, that, we rewritten it as an elastic cloud service that sits on Azure Storage, Azure Blob, runs in, 200+ data centers, millions of cores, millions of requests per second, exabytes of data. And so we have the content store, which is a data model that from hopefully love from SharePoint, of content types and columns and versioning and real-time co-authoring and notifications and streaming video and so forth. So we really have, above the data storage layer in Azure, built I think the most flexible content repository out there, and now supporting pretty massive scale and multi-geo deployments and government clouds and so forth. The next piece is the security model. I sometimes joke that SharePoint got to $500 million with before we had item level security, because what got SharePoint going in the beginning was the simplicity. Now, of course, we have a very sophisticated security model with classification, labeling, and protection. Lots of flexibility about item level security and policies. One thing we just went to public preview on a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, was Teams Connect shared channels, where you can have a shared channel in Teams between different organizations, and they each see it within their Teams UX. But the cool part of that is, from the SharePoint perspective, is that channel concept is plumbed into SharePoint. So if you wanted to have a team with a SharePoint document library that is shared between organizations, shared channels supports that, and we built that natively in. So there's really no other file system, storage system that has these concepts like classification, labeling, and protection, co-authoring, shared channels. Really powerful. We use, of course, the Microsoft Graph for search and AI. A big part of that is the FAST team, an acquisition we did in 2008, who has worked with folks across Microsoft Research and Bing and so forth to really improve the search ranking algorithms, the flexibility, the UI, the recommended features that based on AI that are in the system. A lot of compliance capabilities that, of course, go across the suite, not just SharePoint, but Exchange and Teams. So data loss prevention, security, and information barriers, e-discovery, auditing, data access governance, and so forth. And then this platform can be accessed through a Graph API. I know I always get feedback about something that CSUM still does that the Graph API doesn't. I promise we're working on that very hard. But that's sort of a picture of how we think about it as an app and as a platform. And just transitioning into what does that actually mean? I just pulled out some of the stuff that's going on in terms of our experiences. So OneDrive is our hero experience where you can get access to OneDrive on any device, iOS, Android, web, Mac, Windows, etc., with sync clients that have support files on demand, support the ability to have your sort of standard documents folder rerouted to OneDrive. We're continuing to improve the sharing experience. That's what the picture at the top is. So anywhere in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you see a sort of common sharing experience. And then on top of that, we're doing new content experience, not just Word, Excel, PowerPoint, but as I mentioned, Teams meeting recordings are stored in SharePoint. Stream video is being replatformed in SharePoint, so you get benefits of the SharePoint framework for customization and in the security and compliance features I mentioned. The new whiteboard is rolling out that is stored in SharePoint for those content management capabilities. The first stage of Microsoft Loop is out there, these component collaborations in Outlook and Teams backed by SharePoint. So lots and lots new content experiences. And so, one of the things we're excited about is there's a lot of innovation in this space in the industry, and you don't have to glue together these different content repositories. SharePoint can store the hundreds of good old files, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF, images, et cetera, as well as these newer formats like Loop and whiteboards. Lists, we broke out from SharePoint. Of course, it's still there, but a lot of people said, why should I create a site just to get to a list? And so you don't have to. For those of you who know SharePoint, these things are actually in what we used to call a My Site or a OneDrive for Business. That's not how we describe it to any user or go through that UI. But when you see your personal lists, that's what they are. They're actually in some hidden folders in OneDrive for Business, aka My Sites. And so we've made lists available with this great new UX, standalone, in SharePoint Sites, in Teams, and back that by a new cached mode that works through a local cache and can even work offline, even do edits offline. So, the old sort of 5,000 item limit, you can have tens of thousands of items that you can work with in a SharePoint list offline. It's pretty blazing fast. And then just like we have OneDrive and OneDrive Consumer, personal, that uses the Microsoft accounts. I'm really excited. A few weeks ago, we went to preview with Microsoft Lists with a personal account or a Microsoft account. So you can use lists in your personal life if you'd like. This is both a cool milestone for lists and shows people how serious we are about it, but also it's an interesting technical milestone because it's the first time SharePoint has been used for a consumer feature. So we're really doubling down on SharePoint as a repository for not just SharePoint sites, but lots of new experiences. And that, of course, leads us to SharePoint Sites. And we've done some UI updates for navigation. One of my favorites is the app bar. For publishing, we've improved. We sort of benchmark our usability of publishing, and it's up 20 points in the last 2 years with the dozens of changes we've made. We've done integrated templates with teams, so you can define a sales team that includes their channels, their Power Apps, and their SharePoint pages and doc libraries and so forth. That's pretty cool. And then, as I mentioned, we are doing shared channels across teams in SharePoint. support custom apps. We love that there are tens of millions of users every day using SharePoint apps. When we introduced the SharePoint framework in 2016, a lot of people poked at me and said, yet another new SharePoint programming model. And it's fair. I had introduced some new ones as web tech in the industry had changed. We tried to keep up. Was it XML or JSON or, React and, and so my goal was to pick one that was pick a programming model that was durable. And here we are in 2022, 6 years after the future of SharePoint. And the story I told you in May 2016 is still true today. SharePoint framework for UX customization, Graph API for data level, and Power Platform for no-code, low-code solutions. So I don't intend to change the programming model in the rest of my career, but we'll see. Maybe something will change in tech that causes us to need to adapt a little bit, but full steam ahead on that. Hopefully you all saw that last fall at Ignite, we GA'd Viva. Microsoft Viva is an employee experience platform for learning, for knowledge, for employee engagement, and so forth. 4 apps were included in that. 2 of them were built on top of SharePoint. In fact, you could argue, you could have called them SharePoint connections and SharePoint topics. But we decided that we wanted to, SharePoint meant content management, and so we wanted to have a new tier of value, a new way to tell a story. And so, Teams is about communications, SharePoint's about content management, and Viva is about employee engagement. And so Viva Connections, Viva Topics are built on SharePoint, and a lot more coming there. We have great teams in Viva Connections and Viva Topics, some really exciting stuff. I think Mark Cashman or Chris McNulty just did on Twitter today an update on Topics and how it's going to be integrated with more of the apps in M365. So exciting stuff there. And then, perhaps last, but definitely not least, one of my favorites is continuing SharePoint's heritage is a leader in content management. We announced a year or so ago SharePoint Syntax, which is AI-based metadata management, processing. We've added some new things, content assembly. People asked us since the second release of SharePoint for document assembly. We now have it. And then some solutions for, say, RF contracts and invoicing and so forth. So pretty big set of innovations. The SharePoint team is, if I had to gauge it, twice the size it was 3 years ago. And so growing faster, never listening to your feedback, and hopefully innovating. And so as I sort of explained what was next, we've got a big investment. We're excited about it. And I'll close with just asking you to stay part of the community. Thank you for being part of this event. We've got the online tech communities, as you know. We have Patterns and Practices, P&P, for developers. Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty do a really great podcast called the Intrazone. The latest one, they have one of the product managers working on Microsoft Loop talking about that. We have the SharePoint Lookbook online for people, say, who haven't seen SharePoint in a while. It's a good place to send them to know that SharePoint looks great out of the box. Some learning tools and ways to champion Microsoft 365. So with that, maybe I'll stop screen sharing and sort of open it up for discussion and questions and feedback. And you can raise hands, and I'll use that.
Specifically, because most of us probably work within the government in this, in our group. Just wondering if you're seeing anything specific for government, GCC. How are we treated differently from the rest of the consumers out there? Because what we do is so different.
Yeah, we try not to. For our more mature, bigger teams, it's reasonably straightforward for us to try to get close to SIMship in base GCC as with the rest of the clouds. And teams Yeah, I may not have mentioned this up front. I run Teams, and I took over Teams about 2 years ago. And Teams for sure was well behind in GCC versus other clouds. I think there was a list of, at that point, 125 features that are different, and we're now down to 25. This is ballpark. I don't remember the exact numbers. And so it wasn't because we, just being super transparent, because we didn't get it. It was just a lot of work. And, we had to invest in the system so that GCC was not dramatically more expensive for an engineer to write a feature for versus the rest of our clouds. GCC High for some features, particularly things that depend on a brand new service in Microsoft, is extra work because we have to go through some different certifications and get different people trained up on it. We are working on that. I'm very open to feedback that the features that people need the most between GCC and GCC High that we're not getting to. Probably the biggest pain point I hear, which we are landing in the next, I think not this quarter, but next quarter, is more federation and collaboration cross clouds. So somebody in GCC High can collaborate with a user in GCC. We have to get that right and make sure all the auditors who issue the approvals for these GCC, people desperately want it, but they want it to not breach, the guidelines, and so that's work. It's work we're excited to do. It's just work. DoD falls into the same thing as GCC, and then the other thing you've probably seen is both for Azure and for Microsoft 365, we just announced that we're rolling out, top secret intelligence air-gapped clouds for folks in the intelligence community, which is another tier of stuff. That's a different can of worms, and probably I shouldn't go into here because that's the kind of thing we'd have to talk to people about specifically. So we have a big investment. I think we are almost to the way we should be, which is getting GCC at parity. We are committed to GCC High and DoD getting very close to that. There are some things that are very expensive, so just keep us posted on where you see the biggest pain points. But the other thing I know is sometimes you all will talk to people at Microsoft who don't really understand the difference, and so you'll get somebody in support, and you'll know more than they will about the variance between GCC High and our standard clouds. Besides closing the feature gaps, we are also working on the just training and education of our support group and how that gets routed. I think we're making good progress there, but more to do. So we're committed. I think we've made a lot of progress. We have more to do, and you guys can give us feedback on what are the most urgent things where we could close the gap.
The tech to me is wonderful. I think my biggest problem is really trying to train people in the government who learned IT in the 90s and haven't picked up any new skills since. That, hey, we need some split tunneling so that I don't cross the firewall 4 times just to have a Teams conversation, because now I have to go through the VPN and it's a mess. And so trying to train the government, look, there's a new way to do IT, is my bigger problem. That has a lot less to do with what Microsoft has developed. It's training the government how to use it.
Yeah, no, and we've probably been in like 10,000 meetings about split tunneling. I had us publish a blog and guidance like right when COVID hit, and I know we've updated this and we've done this talk. And if you want to ping me for you probably found our best content on this topic. But it's really important that end user traffic doesn't flow back to the network, go through all its routers, and then back out to some internet connection to the cloud. It's just those devices don't really add an extra layer of security, and the networks really torque performance, particularly in a world where nobody was expecting people to do all day long video calls. And so you can, you know, trust Microsoft 365. Of course, you should have, um, you know, you need to make sure that the device is um, up to date, and has no vulnerabilities. That's super, super important. But the traffic can go straight to, the Microsoft cloud, and that you'll save money, you'll have as good security, and the performance will be dramatically, dramatically better, um, as you all know. I don't know that I recall us, we got anecdotal feedback about what it means for calls and meetings, but I don't recall a quantitative measurement on it. But when we would go talk to people about SharePoint file upload download performance, it was like 10x. People were able to get, 10 times the file download speed with split tunneling than they were doing traversing their own network. So this is like a material thing for end users. And so, but I know the CISOs need the information to make sure it's secure, and we've documented all that. We've convinced many, many CISOs. So it's just like you said, a user education thing.
Marlena, you had your hand up.
Hi, yes, no, I really appreciate it. I'm pumped to move to the modern experience. I just kind of have a question more on how to get there and if there's a plan on having the modern publishing sites, because unfortunately our entire terabytes of data are sites and subsites and all using the publishing classic experience. And so really we're thinking, okay, well, maybe do we build out team sites created for each department and have that be internal content and leave whatever is on the classic experience until eventually we create new communication sites and then build a hub off of that. But I'd love to use the modern experience, and we're pushing for at least the modern document libraries because Internet Explorer is retiring June 15th, and that's how users connect to Open with Explorer, which that's all our users use. So I just wanted to know if you or anyone knows how to get us there.
Yeah, no, what you described is the right playbook with one additional thing. One is just, in any tech transition, big bang is not the right way to go. Avoid, even in our code bases, we try to avoid these big bang things. So just get going with new team sites in the cloud. You can run your existing publishing sites in classic mode. There's nothing wrong with that. We support that. They are not as fast as the newer sites. We have done some work to optimize the performance of them around things that got bottlenecked with structured navigation and so forth. But just the overall rendering flow of the page is not as fast as just doesn't use the modern browser tech, so it can't be. And then, start building new communication sites. But we have a tool that will transform an existing publishing site into a new communication site that works. I would not oversell it. It works a fair amount of the time where you might say, oh, that's good enough. I can tweak it and it'll be better than what I had and I'm on modern. And so I will go look for that. If somebody's got it, knows it, and can drop it in the chat, that's great. But in parallel, I'll try to answer the next question and look for that. But that's the right playbook: is migrate team sites to the cloud and create new team sites. Migrate your existing publishing sites and see if you can transform some of them, because you might not have to wait to building them from scratch. And the new user experience, the authoring experience, I know there's a few things about layout flexibility that are not quite the same as what we had in the past. We're going to bring those back. But the authoring experience and performance is pretty dramatically better. So your users might have to adapt to a little bit of a change, but there'll be a win in it for them.
I will say I've been doing. We didn't have anything before we got the DoD cloud. So we went straight to modern. We were able to go straight to modern, so that was great. And it does take a little getting used to, like you said, with the layout things. But I have found the more you use it, the better it gets. Like, I like it a lot better. I have two questions, because one about SharePoint rules. Right now, they're just email notifications, sort of customized alerts. In like when you do the SharePoint rules, I was just wondering if there was any sort of plan to do more with them, sort of SharePoint rules.
SharePoint rules. Oh, do you mean the things we added? Well, let me. Tell
Yeah,
me more.
it's so you're on a SharePoint library or a SharePoint list. There's an automate button, and now it has automate, power automate, or
Yep.
SharePoint rules.
And its routing is just via email. And what else how else would you like to?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it would just be like maybe add a Teams post or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of idea, like just sort of those simple notifications, simple automation right there on the list or library level.
I don't know the state of that, but I can't believe we are not actually doing. I bet we're already working on that, but I don't know off the top of my head. Because we were doing so many things for tighter Teams integration. You might have seen in the picture I showed the sharing dialog that now has a Teams button on it. We just did the Teams template stuff, and so I don't know off the top of my head. But God,
sure. Yeah, no, it looks like there's room to grow. That's all. And I was just wondering if there was anything up ahead. And like I said in the chat, the differentiation between what I can find documentation wise on the roadmap and the docs.microsoft.com has really come a long way in the last couple of years. So kudos to whoever's responsible for that. Speaking from the government center here in DC.
That's great to hear.
I'd say that my favorite thing in the last few years is how much you guys have expanded the learning for all of the new features and the new certificates and everything else that's out there. You walk through all of the training right there on your own site. I don't have to go pay thousands of dollars and hope that some other company got it right to get certified.
Oh, that's good to hear. It's a challenge because we're shipping. Before, when we shipped every 2.5 years, one of the luxuries of it is we had the last 6 months in the beta cycle to get caught up on documentation. And now when we're shipping all the time, it's a challenge for folks. And so thank you. It's good to hear. We did, one thing that I thought was really good that we did was the adoption center that was itself a SharePoint site. So if people wanted to customize it and add their own specific training, they could. Yep, you've got it.
Richard, you can go ahead.
I was just kind of curious, Jeff, where do you see adaptive cards moving in on the team space and into SharePoint, maybe SharePoint lists integration? I'm really keen on the interface and the flexibility of the adaptive cards for kind of rapid forms manipulation. But I'm curious of where do you see that integration going? How do you see that landscape changing?
Yeah, we're gonna push it as hard as we can for a couple of reasons. One, it's just from a security standpoint, it's very safe to just have these things deployed and not have to have 12 steps for deploying code, which is great. Performance, we control the rendering of them, so it's we love the SharePoint framework because you need something like the SharePoint framework for the degree of customization and the Teams toolkit and so forth. But people could conceivably write bad code with JavaScript poking the DOM that leaks memory, too many round trips to data store. Never. No, never. Not even our developers ever do that. Like all our developers are perfect. We've never introduced a bug ever in our code. So having something like adaptive cards that's just a simpler model more declarative, more visual, visual. We can, it just makes it easier if we change the style sheet to sort of update it. And so you see us in Teams, chat apps, and we did include support for adaptive cards in the SharePoint framework for Viva connections, because we tried a few different things. We had the SharePoint mobile app and still do, but running a web page that might have 10 different React-based SharePoint framework web parts on it on a phone is tricky for us to guarantee the performance on, because we're not in control very much. And so we said, look, we just got to give people something simpler for the phone. And so where we started was, the including adaptive cards in SharePoint framework as part of Viva connections, both on mobile and desktop. And, of course, like any simple declarative model, we found some things that were gaps that you could only do in code. And so we're getting that into adaptive cards. But generally, I would say we're going to push it pretty aggressively in both teams in SharePoint. And, it's got, controlling the performance, having enough trust in the security model that it can be on by default, et cetera. There's a number of advantages to it. But we won't get rid of, we'll continue to have custom JavaScript-based extensions to SharePoint and Teams. We can't just dumb it down and only use adaptive cards.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just too restrictive. So what we'll do is just grow the capabilities adaptive cards have over time.
That's great. Thanks.
Sure.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Hey, Jeff. So I'm a little biased coming from the Power Platform background, but I wouldn't be here today without those two little buttons in SharePoint back in the day, the Power Ups and Microsoft Flow buttons. I was wondering though about if you could talk to sort of how your team is looking to the Power Platform and how you're building integrations in there, and if there's anything that excites you or that you think are opportunities.
Yeah, I'll be very open about that, because I think there's a lot of great stuff going on, but there's a few places where I hear questions sometimes about our strategy. So one, this was a big bet. When Satya first became CEO, I worked for Amy Hood running corporate strategy for a year in 2014. And then Satya asked me to come back to SharePoint. And, being away for SharePoint for a year was kind of interesting, because I got to see what was going on in the rest of the industry. And I got to have a little bit of an outsider view of SharePoint and what we do differently and so forth. And it was really, one thing that was really clear to me is that, in the history of SharePoint, we had, SharePoint Workflow, SharePoint Designer, SharePoint Workflow used some tech from BizTalk and .NET, but it was really very SharePoint specific. And so coming back to the team in 2015, I said, gosh, we really shouldn't have a bespoke workflow engine just for our product. We should, and so there was a nascent project going on at Microsoft after whatever it was, Workflow Foundation evolved. I think it was called Sienna at the time. And there was something called Microsoft Flow, which you remember. Flow started out like if this, then that. That was like a lot of things. It started out as a consumer thing, and then everybody realized all the money was in enterprise. And so they, Sienna and Flow came together, and James Phillips, who had come in and lead those teams, I said, hey, James, you should build the workflow engine for the company. And, can I bet on you, though? Are you serious? And he said, of course I'm serious. What are you like? Why are you pushing on me? And I said, well, because I've changed workflow in SharePoint twice, and this will be the third time, and I want it to be the last time in my career. And he said, well, of course. And I said, well, what's in it for you, James, is, a lot of people love SharePoint, and we're going to drive a lot of adoption to whatever you call this Sienna Flow thing. And he said, okay, sounds good to me. And there was this junior PM in the team at the time, not too junior, Charles Lamanna. And so we started to work together, and as you recall, in SharePoint, 2016, when we introduced the modern UI, we ripped about 90% of the stuff out of the ribbon in SharePoint and just did, the 4 or 5 things that people used all the time, buried a bunch of other stuff under settings, except for one thing where we added, create a flow and create a form. And wow, did it really resonate, right? You all are examples of that people loved the idea. We got a lot of feedback on SharePoint's integration with, the Power Platform. And I think it's been a marriage made in heaven, both on Power Apps and Power Automate. SharePoint is, there's no competition between SharePoint lists and Dataverse. Some people think there is. There was a thread on Twitter the other day. It's like, oh my gosh, we love lists, we love Dataverse. If you really are confused and you want to build something sophisticated, use Dataverse. It's fine. We love that. But the two things have grown together, and we've done some new scenarios. Like I mentioned, SharePoint Syntax uses AI Builder that's part of the Power family. And then Teams came along, and Teams and Power Apps did, great integration, a lot of things there. So I'd say things are, going super well. When people say, like, why are you still doing lists when there's Dataverse? We want to make sure that there's a very simple end user experience for creating lists and libraries that has no artificial headroom, that you can build super flexible things on it. But if you pick Dataverse, that's great. That's, super awesome. And, I'm trying to think what else. Oh, the earlier question about the automate. We tried for a while to have the only way that you build some little things like manager approvals to be in Power Automate. It was a little bit overkill, to be frank, and so we did, these very simple rule-based things. I resisted it for the first couple of years. Now that we have them, I feel like, I was worried having these little rule things would confuse people. Should they use that or Power Automate or not? It doesn't appear to have done so. Yeah, we're doubling down, working together very closely. Charles just announced the Power Apps, Power Platform Conference in Orlando in September and invited me to speak, and so I'm happy to be there. So just tons of great work between our teams, and a lot more to come. As you know, we embed Dataverse in Teams. We just announced Power Automate workflows are in the Teams store. So if you're like right within the Teams app store, you can pick some flow that you like to use and use it in your chat. So it's a really, really great partnership. A lot of respect between the teams, and welcome all ideas on how we could do better. Yeah.
For a little bit less technical, I do have a question. Just wondering, you have had a very long career at Microsoft. I've followed quite a bit of it. And I'm just wondering, where do you see yourself going before you're like, none but pina coladas and the beach from here on?
Yeah. Gosh, I hadn't expected that question.
Not that I'm expecting you to fight for Satya's seat, but
no. That's clearly not going to happen. I feel so lucky. I mean, people tell you in general, like the big wave of self-help books in the last 10 years have used the word gratitude as people have coached people to how to get through COVID and, all the stuff that's gone on in the world, including in your city, regardless of what anybody's political beliefs are. It's been a hard couple of years, and I'm just so grateful. I love technology. I love that we have challenging goals in these projects. We go try to build things. I love that what we're doing is useful. I get to work with, really brilliant people, You know, Charles Lamanna, for example, we work with in the Power Platform team is wonderful to work with. Yeah, I sort of joined at the beginning as an avatar. Alex Kittman, who runs our mixed reality team, you know, super brilliant guy. And the fact that Teams maybe is perhaps the best shot in taking virtual reality mainstream. You know, I feel very privileged to lead that and partner with him. So I'm having a ball. I feel very fortunate to work with customers in our team. Um, I, I do have some goals for what we do. I think we can continue to make what we're doing in SharePoint and OneDrive and Teams and lists simpler. Um, but also more, that's sort of the art of a product designer at Microsoft is how do you make something both simple and flexible? I think SharePoint was never perfect at this, but we were certainly ambitious in how much capabilities we tried to make mainstream, and we were mostly successful. And I feel good about that, but I still have some things I want to accomplish in terms of simplicity. As I sort of, we have several hundred million users in Microsoft 365. Uh, I'd love to get to 1 billion users. I think that would be amazing to have that many people around the world see what we're doing to be useful, that we could get to that. I don't know if I'll retire the day we have 1 billion users or wait to retire until then. So I, you know, I love my job. I have the best job in the world, and I won't do it forever, but I'm not I'm not going anywhere right now. And it was yesterday, we had our first in-person gathering in a while amongst some of the leaders in Microsoft. We were in the Microsoft, there's a pub on campus, and we were there, and I was talking to Panos Panay, who runs the Windows team, and Alex Kittman, who runs the HoloLens mesh team. And, Satya came over, and it was just incredibly energizing to try to build some new things in an industry where there are really smart people and other companies trying to build similar things. And maybe our thing will be the best. We faced a lot of competition in the days at SharePoint, and we still do with SharePoint and Teams. And I kind of like the test of, is our thing good enough that people will choose it over the other choices? So I didn't directly answer your question because I don't really have a date. My wife and I have discussed a date, but nobody else knows it besides my wife and I.
I'm not looking for your retirement. I'm just wondering, like, how high were you wanting to get?
I'm I'm totally good where I am. I manage a few thousand people around the world. I get to work on end user. I'm just so lucky. Our team works on end user experiences for consumer photos in OneDrive to file system and storage stuff to audio video codecs to mixed reality. And so I feel like I have as diverse technical set of capabilities that I get to work with as I could ever imagine. So I'm not, who knows, but I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm overwhelmed, but I'm busy, so I'm happy.
Hey, Joe, go ahead.
All right. Well, I do have one tough question.
Yeah, you guys have been an easy group. My gosh.
Yeah.
Like,
so,
nobody's given me the why did you retire InfoPath or we're not going to the cloud.
I will say that in this particular group, I've been the one carrying the anti-InfoPath bat for 2 years. I've been beating people with it. So they probably.
Why did you kill InfoPath? I'll ask the question.
The true answer.
I'll bring the bat to you. Mike and I work together. I'll bring the bat to work, Mike.
That's fine. Do it. I'll take the beating. I don't care. It's a good question.
The true answer is in the transition to the cloud, we were massively short on experienced engineers that were needed to build the infrastructure we needed to do the cloud. And so we had to recruit and make some tough choices to move talent to it. We also felt like the model we had in InfoPath wasn't necessarily going to be the path for the long term about how InfoPath worked. And the problem was we left a bit of a vacuum. Now, eventually, and I know Power Apps doesn't quite fill it 100%. I get that. And I get custom web pages doesn't quite fill it 100%. So we did leave a gap. But the just gosh honest truth was, whenever we did it, in that, gosh, I give or take a year or so, around 2011, right? We needed to build an infrastructure team to scale the service to make it 7/24, 365 days a year, 4 nines, support, provisioning of users. When COVID hit, the peak week in March 2020, there was a couple of days where we added 3 million new user accounts to the system in a single day. We'd never anticipated that. Obviously, that's not, it didn't sustain at that rate, but and that the system that did that user provisioning routing system, dated back to some great early work that people worked on InfoPath switched to doing. So we didn't think our form strategy was the right one for the long run, but we needed to make a just, frank, tough call on talent.
Well, and just a comment on that to echo what Scott was saying earlier about how hard it is to train government people. I mean, and I'm not saying that I rely on WYSIWYG stuff all the time, but it's just been really difficult getting our customers to wrap their head around the paradigm change. And that's not just talking about InfoPath, it's for everything. I mean, the citizen developer route, is a good route and it's teaching me a lot of new things, but the user adaptation, at least in the government and my customer, is horrible. I mean, we rolled out everything in 2020 and barely anybody uses it. Now, granted, it's on the low side and everything and not much goes on there, but it's still really difficult to get these government folks who learned IT back in the 90s and then stopped learning to learn again.
Yeah,
those kind of tools just made it super easy to roll out solutions for them where they didn't have to really think about, a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and so
I'm being clear, but
no, you definitely are, and I think there's a set of these apps that lists out-of-box forms can do, and then there's a set of these apps that really need, Power Apps to do, and we do have enough success in both, like both lists and with the out-of-box UI and Power Apps are now wildly successful that we can say, look, we're not deluding ourselves. People are using these at a lot of scale. But I think it's totally fair to say there's a bit of a gap in there. And for people who aren't willing to learn, a lot of people have learned and embraced Power Apps like wildfire. If somebody's not willing to learn something new, it's tough. It's tough.
Like leadership.
Yeah, and I just, I think we have, including me, made a few disruptive changes over the years. I do feel pretty good that since 2016, when we rolled out a new sort of strategy, we've been relatively stable and not disrupted things too much. I wouldn't say we're perfect, but gosh, I look at the last 6 years versus the first 3-4 releases of SharePoint, and feel like we've given people stability since 2015-16. But welcome feedback. It's I don't want to say we've been perfect in the last decade, but I think we've been pretty good.
Well, I'm happy to be with InfoPath.
My only comment to that is please beef up rules, like Joe was asking earlier.
Yeah.
Add as much 2013 and 2010 workflows to rules. That would make things a lot smoother for customers.
No, great. I love that.
Ideas, those
I will pass that feedback on
Yeah,
to the
because
team.
when Joe showed me those rules, I was like, holy goodness, that totally replaced. I mean, that a lot of that replaces 2010 workflows.
Yeah, no, I know. And then, like I said, I think I felt I constrained the team just a little bit in 2016, 17, like to do as much as we could with Flow, partly for engineering efficiency, partly for simplicity of our story externally, because once you have two things, people want to start Twitter threads on when you use one versus the other. And I was a little too purist, and I love the feedback we've gotten on rules is awesome. We're going to do a lot more there.
If I can ask for any kind of support on this one, I would love it. Yesterday, we had some people in an office cite for me the 1950 Federal Records Act because they said that they had control of forms for the agency. And they didn't want anyone to be using Microsoft Forms because they needed to route everything through them. So if I can ask for anything, it's really help the government shape legislation when it comes to IT, because the people who are shaping legislation don't know a damn thing about IT.
Yeah, well, we're definitely glad to do that. We have a big federal team that's there that tries to help. It's actually not just federal government. There's definitely industry specific things. So like the accounting firms told me they could never go to the cloud because there was rules in accounting about physical control of your client's information that could not be released to a third-party agent. And uh, and it turned out that wasn't a law. It was, and it was overly over interpreted. But nonetheless, we had to work with the accounting associations to, like, eventually some pioneering firm said, this isn't actually a law. There's nothing, it's actually if anybody ever pushed us on it, we could say Microsoft's cloud is more secure than our own data centers were. So we have to both influence not only the legislation, which we do have to do. You're right. There's some places where the letter of the law does restrict things, but also the interpretation of the law, because sometimes people interpret these things in a way to justify not having any change.
Yeah, I mean, middle managers, the job of a middle manager is to prevent change. That is their it is their responsibility. Some just take it a little too seriously.
Yeah, and it's tough. I have to be very careful to not be preachy tech person about, that's what disruptive technology is for. And if the government had more competition, then, of course, some other government, and it's just like, if I said that, it would have, I would be out of touch with the real situation on the ground, the constraints that governments have, the funding they have, their ability to hire people, the risk that people have in their careers that they take in the government. And so I try to be more empathetic than saying, oh, IT, what a bunch of stick in the muds. It's hard. And so I'm out there evangelizing. I definitely am. I do think, look, embracing this change is going to make the government more efficient. It's going to make IT people heroes. It's going to make employees that work for government agencies more productive, get time back in their day, have more satisfaction. There's all sorts of tangible benefits of this. But I think the way to do it is for me to lean into those benefits to the organization and the individuals, as opposed to coming across as stereotypically dismissive of government IT. That's not really fair to. And I know I can imagine some of the people here are part of government IT, and a lot of people do great work, and it's not like everybody in the commercial world is embracing change either.
I'd say that I'm very happy with my current client because I think that they get it a lot better than some of my former ones. I've worked in a number of different agencies, and the lower level management that I have right now, because I have more interaction with them, they definitely get it. They are trying really hard to move a very big ship. And that takes a lot of work to move something this big.
Yeah, and COVID has been a tragedy, but in the spirit of not letting a crisis go to waste, once it became clear companies had no choice to go to the cloud and support distributed devices, not all, but a good set of these conversations went away, because then you could say, well, the cloud works pretty well. And if I can do video, why can't I share documents? And since I'm doing video and documents, I have to do e-discovery and auditing anyway. And now I can move more advanced workloads there. So I hope the last couple of years has gotten easier, but I know there's still a lot of resistance.
I don't want to take up too much more of your evening. So, I mean, if anyone else has something to say, please go ahead. I just don't know what your availability is like. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
I have about, I want to be respectful. It's later in the evening for all of you. So I could go maybe 15 minutes more, but it's up to you all.
I think Joe has his hand up.
I hijacked Joe's question, so why don't you go ahead, Joe?
No, that's all right. That's all right. It's a good one. That's fine. You heard the answer about InfoPath. We don't want to hear about it anymore. No. So document libraries and folders, and we got used to metadata and never using folders again. And then when Teams shows up, Teams channels go to a folder in a single document library. And I can't have metadata in my Teams now. I'm like, I don't know that I am zero technical guy. I'm straight up user.
Let me just give you a simple answer. Metadata is coming back.
Per channel?
We are rolling out a common files experience across OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams that will have metadata capabilities in all three places. Don't quote me on a time frame yet, but we will have files experiences that will bring back metadata into both OneDrive and in Teams.
Okay, I don't need a date. I just need to know that the fact that there's that idea coming is good enough. Because I miss the ability to control the metadata between my channels.
Yeah, the under the covers in Teams, of course, the document library is a SharePoint document library, but the user experience was to get to market for Teams written as sort of a least common denominator files UI in Teams. And about a year ago, I had the SharePoint team pick that up, and they are refactoring it so that we can use a common files experience off OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams. And if you're familiar with some of the visualizations we have in Microsoft Lists, you sort of can get the direction that we'll go. Also, Microsoft Lists uses this offline cache that also works online for performance. And so you'll see big improvements in performance, metadata, and consistency across those three places over the next, let's call it, year.
Christoph?
Yes, hi, Jeff. Well, I've always wondered why in Teams the choice was made to use a single SharePoint document library instead of one document library by channel, which could have helped, with content types and metadata. So, what is the rationale behind this?
It was just a trade-off that was sort of 55, 45, one way or the other, and the team just felt like it was a simpler model. I think it's fair to say, fair to debate it. It wasn't some, religious thing that I think people felt like, too much document library proliferation, had its trade-offs. And so I think we should give people more flexibility there. I think we should let people define a template for a team and pick one option or the other. If you honestly, I don't know that we're actually building that right now, but I think it wasn't necessarily anything religious for the long term.
Thanks.
I always encourage them to build additional libraries because of metadata and folder structures, because they want to build their folders. And I'm like, don't, you're going to mess up your channels. And so I always encourage them to create a whole nother library for their
it's one of those
document management purposes.
But then I can't drag. Yeah, but I just can't drag my stuff in through the chat into the files because the files is always in the folder.
Yes, you can create a new tab showing that new library.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
That's not going to help you with chat.
The chat files when they share the files in chat.
Yeah.
Of the team. That's what I mean by files tab.
Yeah, and the files tab is going to have to know about both the things shared in chat as well as the things stored in the channel. It really just came down to what you're all describing as the more flexible, powerful scenario, but it's probably more complicated for the more novice case, and where it'd be nice to just go to a SharePoint site or a file explorer and browse the tree. And so it's there's a pro either way, and I think we should give people the choice.
When is the next big set of announcements going to be, Jeff? Like what event or should we be tuning into?
Well, for sure, Ignite in the fall. That I don't think we've announced the time. Oh, sorry. There'll be some news at Build in May. Some Teams platform news and a few related SharePoint things. In terms of end user value, we'd aim it in the fall at Ignite, which I don't think the date has been announced yet. We'll get, there's some things that don't need to wait for either of those, and so we'll get those things out sooner. For example, I don't know if we announced it before or not, but today McNulty did a post that talked about how Viva Topics will integrate with Teams, Outlook, and Yammer conversations. I think that's the scope of what he announced. And so there's things like that. I'm pretty excited about that one. That one's a big deal. We 3 weeks ago announced the public preview of shared channels across Teams and SharePoint. So there's medium-sized announcements all the time now, but I would say the bigger, the two big moments we'll aim toward is one is in the fall at Ignite, and the second is the Microsoft 365 conference in the spring, that was just in Vegas. Because of Omicron and all that, we kept it, because we just had no idea where we'd be. We kept it low key and didn't really announce much new there. But next spring, we would aim to make that a big moment, like the SharePoint conferences and M365 conference were. But if we've got something like extra rules features ready to go in August, we're not going to hold it until October. So I'll go see if folks can code that up.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm loving the integration between Teams, To Do, Outlook, and Planner. And what I'm interested in, and I know probably why it happened, but the inconsistency between names of fields, common fields like labels versus categories, and categories in Outlook, labels in Planner. And when you're trying to explain and teach other people, it gets more confusing. You have different levels. And the other one similar to that is the categories and labels, and then priority and importance. And there's some other ones too, but are you looking at that at all, trying to bring that together over time? I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I see the difficulty.
As you know, these things, just even take OneDrive and SharePoint, these things grew up completely independently. And, sometimes when you bring things together that were independent, that you have some tough calls, like whose muscle memory do you break? And so that one, I'm familiar with it. I don't lead the teams focused on to-do and planner, so I don't know the details of it, exactly what they're doing. I do know they get this feedback. There's half the people want planner and to-do to be more harmonized. The other half want planner and project to be more harmonized, and so they get pulled a little bit. So we, in general, let me say, yes, definitely. We talk about these things all the time. The specific example, we were talking about earlier about the files UX with metadata is like, we got teams to market, so we did a very simple thing on files, but it really, people want richer views of files with metadata in Teams, and they're frustrated. It's different in Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive, and the only way for things to not be different is have one piece of code in 3 places, kind of like what we do for Microsoft Lists. I feel really good. You use lists in the standalone app, you use lists in Teams, you use lists in SharePoint. It's the same code, and so it's generally the same experience. Whereas to-do and planner and Outlook, and there's just, what do you do? Do you rename one of them and annoy the users of the other one? Do you support both the old model and the new model? Then you have a classic and this is what we did in SharePoint, where the state of web tech had advanced so far that by 2015, we really needed to do a modern UI for SharePoint. There was just the classic UI used web tech and that was available in 2010, and the browsers that customers had. And so we had to make, some break with the past. But that's painful for, we had a discussion about one example for that. So people do look at it. I don't know if we've got a specific solution there, but it's tricky when you have to pick a winner and annoy the other group of people.
Yeah, and I was just curious because the way I get around, I mean, I keep things simple, but for me personally, I love that integration, and I can deal with, when you start working across all the different, but for the people I'm working with, trying to get them to adopt, I just try to keep it simple, work on one. I totally get it, but I was just curious if that was being looked at.
No, we actually have a name for it in our design team. It's called a Coherence workstream. And so, things that are inconsistent and annoying, not because people are political, but just often because things evolved independently or on different schedules, and you just can't, if you slow everybody down in 100,000 person engineering org to agree on everything, you'd never get anything done. So you just at some point need to tolerate a little bit of divergence sometimes. But anyway, in this Coherence workstream, an example of one that we did that was a win is this file sharing UI. It is the same piece of code on iOS, Android, Mac, Windows, web, in the OneDrive app and the Teams app, and Word, Excel, PowerPoint. And boy, that took a lot of work. But now, the sharing UI is the same, and there's stuff that's different about each endpoint. Like when you're in Outlook, it knows you want to share with people in the DL, or when you're in Teams, you share with the people in the chat. So there's what we call earned differences in the coherence. It can't be exactly the same. So we do have an approach where we say, what are the ones that are really big, that are annoying the heck out of a lot of people and are really inefficient for us to do multiple times? And we take that one off, take those out. This one, it's good. I will pass this one along and ask about it. It may not just have bubbled up to be worth the churn of one set of the users. But
I totally understand it, because I think it is, and I get that, but I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah. I do it's interesting. We have this topics thing in Viva Topics. We're doing work to align the topics into Yammer, for example. How far we can go with topics, and should there be personal topics and Teams topics and company topics? We do talk about this one. And if I was a grand unifier, I'd say, oh, like topics and categories are the same thing. And then just things would grind to a halt and we'd never ship anything, because then you'd have 100 people that have to agree on anything. So at some point we do talk about these things. Sometimes we have to be pragmatists and just say, okay, we can't, be Einstein, who spent the last 30 years of his career working on grand unified field.
Yeah. If I can ask for something, bring in the start date for the tasks in to do so I can schedule them. There's no start date. There's a due date. There's no start date.
In to do, okay. I'll pass, I will pass that along to the team.
Yeah. Roland.
Oh, Richard. Sorry. You talking to me?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
No worries. It's not the first time. Yeah, so my final question was, we just got the announcement or the reminder, April 11th, 2023, for Office 2013 to die off. Assuming that's Designer 2013 and Workflow 2013s and everything else to go with it, is there a drop dead date for 2013 Workflow online? A lot of clients, it generated a lot of questions when that email just came out.
Yeah, big topic. I don't believe we have decided or announced something yet. When we announced this for 2010 workflows, the team came to me to propose we announced a date with a multi-year end game for 2013, and I said no. Not yet. We're not ready yet. We needed to see more people move off 2013 workflows on to Power Automate of their own volition, rules and so forth. I know we are discussing this, but I don't want to commit that it's going to be supported for 10 years. I don't want to hint that some announcement's coming. It's just a good reminder to me that it'll be an important thing that we'll want to give people a lot of notice on. At this point, it's not the kind of thing we're going to give people only 12 months. One, I don't believe we've made the decision because I haven't approved anything. But two, we would not, not do it with short notice. I know it's interesting, our friends at Nintex, who, a lot of you probably know Nintex, great workflow partner. Some of their stuff historically worked on 2013 workflows. Some worked on their new workflow cloud. They would like me to do this because they want to move their existing customers off the 2013 workflow and just have one code base to maintain and secure. But let me not commit to anything one way or another here, but just take your feedback. This is a really serious thing and we should get it right.
Yeah, it just raised a lot of questions. And, when 2010 workflow got the shutout, there was a lot of migrations and stuff in flight, things that kind of, got paused.
Yeah.
Just to re-strategize, right? It was all a strategy game. And I think as much advanced notice as we can put on the forefront for customers for strategy or sure. Retooling will help. Yeah.
On 2010 workflows, there were sort of two things. One was the data was pretty clear. There weren't many running in the cloud left. There were plenty on premises, but not many running in the cloud. And while those are important, and those were important customers, the data supported, it was something we should consider or be open to. The second thing is the 2010 workflow stack included a set of dependencies that we could not be sure of securing into the distant future. And I don't have to share you all know what's going on in the world right now with cyber. We are committed to, proactive security reviews, monitoring, remediation. We're hardcore. It's a massive investment for it. We're super, super serious about it. But if there's it includes, supporting code that was written a long time ago. But we had gotten to the point with 2010 where there were some things in that dependency chain that were pretty massive pieces of code that we were going to have to pick up and support and devote a brand new set of engineers to it. And that there was not a vulnerability, but it was not, we couldn't be confident without a pretty major new investment that we were going to be in a good position going forward if new vulnerabilities were found. And we're not in that position in 2013. And so that's why we didn't do that. But that was, to be honest, the trigger is, wow, we will have to make a massive new investment to make sure it's secure going forward, because we'll have to own a bunch of out-of-date, out-of-support .NET stuff. We were basically going to have to be the .NET team without being the .NET team.
Don't sign up for that. That's not a good deal.
And so it just wasn't, it wasn't feasible, just to be frank. Whereas it's been feasible for 2013 to stand behind it. But sure. It'd certainly simplify our life to not have to do it for the long run. But anyway, so I'll commit to making sure people have a long heads up if we make that decision.
Thank you. While we're talking wish list stuff, can we have time in planner tasks? Some reference of time. Like that's the one different, so you're on the Kanban board system and looking at something like an Azure DevOps where you can do time estimates and actuals on your Kanban boards, where planner doesn't have any reflection of true time. How much did this task take me? That's my wish list.
No, that's great. And if you think, anything, feel free to mention anything we didn't cover or get to. Like if you want to send me a bullet list, on Twitter, mention me, DM me, and just say, hey, please pass these along. I'm thrilled to do that. The list is now growing longer than my memory. I know I've got to push on rules flexibility. I know I have to push on metadata and doc libraries in Teams, and I think I got some to do and planner suggestions to pass on the team. But feel free to always give us feedback. We do circulate it, and hopefully you see we do build some of these things too.
Yeah, and we used to go user voice, right? So now, in absence or in changing from user voice, I don't want to be, hammering on you guys on Twitter all the time.
No.
Is there another formal channel?
Yeah. I'm blanking on the name. There's a successor to user voice. Gosh, it's using our own product, and that's why we switched.
I saw it today even.
I feel bad that I don't even remember the name of it.
Feedback Hub.
Yeah, Feedback Hub.
Got it.
Yeah, and the team does look at that every month, top items, etc.
Great.
Okay. Great. Well, we're about at time. I don't see any hands up left. If there was anything though pressing, I'm happy to take one more. But otherwise, thank you all so much for supporting us. We're excited to partner with you all and supporting community events. Hope to see you. I'll make a plug for next spring at the Microsoft 365 conference in person, and hope this was fun for you. I love doing it and learned a lot.
I've really appreciated you choosing my group and everyone here to talk to today. Really, it's been a nice time. Thank you.
As long as I'm working, I'm happy. Yeah, I can't promise to show up to every user group meeting every day, but once every month or two, I want to do one around the world. I'd be glad to, you guys have had your turn for a little bit, but I'm happy, happy to do this again.
Great.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to stop recording.
Okay. Thank you all. Have a great evening. And thank you so much for all your support of us.